Let's just get this over with. Everyone knows Spectacular Spider-Man was a great show. It was accurate to the source material, it had a great voice cast that really fit the characters, and it told its stories with planned out long-term arcs in mind that always had a payoff or would have led to something greater. It was pretty much the complete package, and Sony did a good job with it. While it was still running, the television rights to Spider-Man were returned to Marvel by Sony in September 2009 as a concession for holding on to the movie rights forever. But Disney purchased Marvel in December 2009, and with that deal, they actually also purchased the TV rights to Spider-Man, which meant that Sony and Marvel both no longer had the rights to keep the show going. Disney did. Ultimately, they couldn't continue it because Sony still had the rights to Spectacular, and had to start fresh with something created in-house that they could manage and work on their own instead of having to cooperate with guys like Victor Cook and Greg Weisman that already had their own intentions for a Spidey show. This all begets a new series titled after and loosely adapting Brian Michael Bendis and Mark Bagley's Ultimate Spider-Man comics. You can tell because of that haircut no one has anymore. It was big in the late 90s, early 2000s though. When comparing this to the comics, I think it's most fair to base that comparison on the 1610 books since that's what the Ultimate series was using for a baseline. Though I wish we got something a little bit more similar to the tone and storylines of that book because for all its faults, it's still a really interesting and likable comic. I know everyone had words for Ultimate Spider-Man when it came out, thinking it was the worst things could possibly get. They were wrong, but between the childish sense of humor that often falls flat for viewers over the age of, say, 6, the lack of depth to the characters and storytelling, or the really poor voice acting from certain major characters, there's a lot of valid reasons to hate this show, and I will be talking about a lot of them. However, I think we're all too harsh on Ultimate. I mean, it's not perfect by a long shot, but it's not completely irredeemable. There's some stuff I like here. There's some things I may not agree with, but I understand them. And I do find some of its stranger quirks at least fascinating to talk about and dissect. Probably one of the biggest sources of frustration is that there's 4 times as much of this series as Spectacular, and a huge portion of that can be sort of low quality, but nonetheless, this is the longest running Spider-Man series by far. There's a lot here, but a big fear of doing this video is that it would just be 100% complaining and trashing a show that's been trashed to death already. So let's be fair to it and acknowledge its merits while also not straying away from talking about what it lacked. Here's a lukewarm defense of Ultimate Spider-Man. I guess. I don't know. I ended up really wanting it to be over the more I watched it.
We could be a team. We gonna get fame, money.
Don't forget the bitches.
There's not gonna be fame, and there's not gonna be bitches. Okay, I didn't ask for any of this. I just want to be like everybody else.
This series differs from the rest by firmly planting itself in a Marvel universe that is currently inhabited by hundreds of already established heroes and villains. Instead of Spidey keeping pretty much to himself, minus the occasional crossover, the show begins with him getting roped into a special team of upcoming teenage superheroes sponsored by S.H.I.E.L.D., and Nick Fury with the goal of improving his independent superhero gig into a government-funded and trained Ultimate Spider-Man. Because of his on-the-job superhero experience, Spidey is placed as the leader of this team and finds himself responsible for guiding and training Luke Cage, Iron Fist, Tigra, and Nova. Given that Luke Cage ends up marrying someone that was in Peter's high school class, I always figured that they weren't that far apart in age, but squarely placing Luke Cage, as well as his best bud Iron Fist, as teenagers the same age as Spider-Man, feels a little weird to me. Those two being here immediately discounts any chance of continuity with Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes, so let's consider this a fresh start of an entirely new Marvel animated universe. I guess that makes this like the 4th one now? I'll start by saying I do like the look of this show. The character designs are pleasant, detailed, colorful, and distinct for this particular take without being too stylized. There's a loose attempt to pay tribute to Mark Bagley's ultimate interpretations of the characters, which is more prevalent in some characters than others. I've always thought his vision for the Spider-Man world was really cool looking and modern, without betraying the classic character designs or being overly militarized. And that translated well into the visual style of this series. I think it looks even better in Season 2 when they started drawing Peter with a more square jaw and making his Spider-Man eyes even more wildly emotive and expressive. Get you a man that could go from Eric Larson to Gabriel Dell'Otto at a moment's notice.
I'm fine. Thanks for asking. Anyway.
Actually, as the show's art style changed, I feel like he started looking mostly like John Byrne's Spider-Man later on. And you know, this show isn't lacking for solid action. When it comes down to the fight scenes, they're well choreographed and well animated. A lot of the techniques here with combining 2D characters and 3D moving backgrounds are like a massive evolution of what they really wanted to do with the 90s series, just with new technology that can make it look really cool. It's all just integrated a little bit better than it used to be. The battles between Spidey and his villains are always exciting and fun to watch, and the fact that he's usually backed up by a whole team of other superheroes in these fights adds for some variety that other Spidey shows never really had. Save for maybe Amazing Friends, since they're usually not this heavy with crossovers. And these crossovers with other heroes are usually the best part of this show. The way Spidey interacts with every Avenger or random hero that pops in is totally different. He fanboys over Iron Man, has immense respect for Captain America, he thinks Moon Knight is a weirdo, he has a friendly rivalry with Hawkeye, he can't stand Wolverine, and he always advocates that the Hulk is a good guy that's just misunderstood. And you just know I gotta talk about the Deadpool episode. This was Deadpool's first time being allowed to directly interact with a cartoon Spider-Man, after those 2 other times where we got blue-balled. But I'm very indifferent to this episode. In terms of writing a Deadpool for kids, it's fine, I guess. I like that it's adapting issue 2 of Deadpool's first ongoing series by Joe Kelly, one of the founders of Man of Action. I gotta wonder if he had a direct role in this episode using that influence for the plot.
Never heard of you. I designed this costume myself.
Black and white eyes, red suit, though you made it your own with the crossword theme. Oh wait! Webs! Those are webs!
Will Friedle could be a great Deadpool if he gave the voice a little bit more Terry McGinnis and less Ron Stoppable.
You can't attack me with puns.
Puns and bullets and pointy things, yes I can! I'm running the show now, and this is just the tip of the spear!
Although overall, for a voice for Deadpool in this, I would have preferred Nolan North or Jason Spicek since he was really good in the Marvel anime stuff. Go check out my video on those! All this show is sorely missing for crossovers is a proper Fantastic Four episode. We only get the Thing one time. All of these team-ups we do get are pretty cool, and if this show is going to be so full of crossovers, they might as well be the best part of it. However, these developed and unique interactions, ironically, don't carry over for Spidey and the main cast of heroes that are in pretty much every episode. Despite being around nearly all the time in the first few seasons, S.H.I.E.L.D.'s superhero teen team are oddly underdeveloped and lacking in any deep connection with Spidey or even each other. The team's dynamic is also never fully formed. These characters don't bounce off of each other well, or really at all. You'd expect Luke Cage and Danny Rand to be broing out all over the place, but they barely speak to each other. None of these characters really talk to each other in a scene without Spider-Man present. We as the viewer never get a sense of any relationships between them at all. The only real thing they share is constantly ganging up on Peter and treating him as an outlier. All of their interpersonal conflicts turn into him versus them. No one ever seems to side with him when there's an argument among the team, and they always act like they don't like him that much.
You seen my friend Peter? Shrimpy kid?
Spaghetti arms?
$3 haircut? Only a 98 average?
Nova and White Tiger in particular are especially rude to him. You ever meet someone who makes shit uncomfortable by getting way too chummy and personal way too fast with friendly insults?
I'm coming! Tell me you got that, Nova.
Totally got it, Power Man.
Best friends can poke fun at each other and make snarky comments because it's earned and comes from a place of love. The team are all shitting on Spidey the second they meet him, and the level of respect and courtesy never really forms. I mean, maybe in the last episode, as we gotta wrap things up, but ugh. They're always hostile or putting him in a bad spot by being selfish assholes.
That's why you ditched me? So you could come home and throw a party?
Surprise?
We are not having a party.
It's called Squash the Spider.
Squash the spider.
With friends like these, who needs enemies?
So we don't buy this bullshit, we're a family rhetoric because he never truly feels like one of them. No matter how nice he is to them, it never seems to be enough. If your family treats you like this, then just get a new one. Fuck those guys. And these characters are not strongly developed enough on their own to make up for this behavior. You don't get a sense of why they're so snotty. They're just like that, and it never becomes endearing. Doing a show like this, with an emphasis on a team, you want to spotlight each character's importance to the team's dynamic, their backstory, and what makes them unique incredibly early or the viewer isn't going to care about them. But the S.H.I.E.L.D. kids don't get individual episodes to flesh them out until midway through Season 2, and these attempts to build them up are pretty laughable. The best try was with White Tiger, because now we know that she inherited her powers from her dad, who was killed by Kraven the Hunter. She's always fighting back a lot of rage.
Just like your father and your grandfather before you, you use your powers of the White Tiger for good. Like you did when you took down Kraven. That White Tiger is still inside you.
That's all well and good, but all we really get about Luke and Iron Fist are reasons they've gotten powers and not much else in terms of personality. Spidey finds out that Luke thought his parents were killed by terrorists trying to steal their super soldier serum, but it turns out they're not and they're fine. They go save them together and that's all we get. No deeper insights into Luke's mentality as a hero or what makes him who he is, or any kind of philosophical stuff about him. It's all treated so casually and surface level.
You risked your life for me when we rescued your parents. You didn't think. You just did.
Iron Fist is sidelined through most of his episode to focus on Spidey having a battle with Scorpion, who is a ninja and sounds like Zuko in this universe, I guess. The only thing Spidey learns about Iron Fist in this episode is that he has a lot of money he never spends.
You're Danny Rand, billionaire Zen master from Kunlun. Remember the Shao Lao? The trials we faced together?
Rand is no more.
And Nova. Jesus Christ, they didn't even fucking try with Nova. His entire episode is more about propping up the Guardians of the Galaxy like a big advertisement, and he's hardly there for it. Season 2 ends with Green Goblin mind-controlling the team and turning them into goblins, and Peter attempts to get through to them by reminding them of all these events and their bond, and he has like nothing to say to Nova at all.
Like the friends we are. We saved an entire galaxy, Sam. We can beat one silly goblin.
Come to think of it, Nova in the show is an irredeemable, annoying piece of human garbage.
Yeah, you get a job now, Parker. You don't need to kiss up to moneybags anymore for cash.
You gave him my costume? Sam?
Wanted to see the look on your face right there. That priceless.
I'm 100% certain that Sam Alexander is a pretty cool character in the comics, and doesn't act anything close to this irritating on his worst day. It seems like they wanted him to be like a lovable asshole, but forgot the lovable part. Every single line of dialogue out of his mouth is talking about how great he thinks he is, or trying to take someone else down a peg, usually Spider-Man. There was a point where they made it seem like he was going to be written out of the show, and I was so excited, until it turned out to be a fake out.
Bruh.
Fuck this guy, seriously. Eventually, these guys stop being front and center, so all the time wasted with them is even more frustrating. In the later half of the show, they fade into the background as Spidey starts going to S.H.I.E.L.D. Academy for training superheroes. They're not really his close circle of friends anymore, they're just kids he goes to school with among like a dozen others that kept getting added as the show went on. They pretty much just got replaced with a team of Spider-themed characters for the whole Web Warriors thing. Given the involvement of Paul Dini and this coming out around the same time as Batman the Brave and the Bold, I always assumed this was supposed to be like that, but for Spider-Man. A more lighthearted and campy show with a sense of humor that's willing to play around with the absurdity of comics and their characters. Batman is basically never Bruce Wayne in that show because he's too busy having adventures. Brave and the Bold is also entirely focused on crossovers with DC characters outside of the Batman world, and showcasing weirder and more amusing parts of comic history to kids that they wouldn't really know about. This was going for something similar. This isn't the show where Gwen Stacy dies in a PG-13 movie spin-off, or Peter visits a little girl with cancer. This is a show where Loki turns Spidey into Spider-Ham, or the team battles Awesome Android, or they give Sandman that silly costume from the comics, or Spider-Man goes to Boston because New Yorkers treat him like crap. Actually, on the list of recommendations for episodes of this show, I put Spider-Man on the very top. That episode is so weird and funny and irreverent. It's like the one time I think they nailed what kind of humor they were going for, because otherwise...
Totally not handled.
Who are you talking to? Come out!
I'll go sunlight all over you.
The humor in this show drags it down immensely.
Okay. Turns out he's pretty cool. Live and learn, huh?
This bitch thinks he's She-Hulk. You wish, buddy. So yes, Batman the Brave and the Bold is silly and intentionally funny. This show
That just makes you pig man on campus.
is trying to also be that, but failing miserably. Spider-Man's fourth wall breaking shtick was such a misfire, and it hurts this show so much because it didn't work one time. And it's in like almost every episode. At best, it's like a Family Guy style cutaway gag that doesn't quite land. At worst, it's like if you were reading a comic book and some annoying asshole who thinks he's way funnier than he actually is walks into the room, takes it out of your hands, and then explains to you exactly what you just read. Then he hands it back to you and leaves. And then at the bottom of the next page, he comes back again. Hey, remember that visual gag in Spectacular Spider-Man where Flash Thompson agreed to be Nick Bottom in the school play, not knowing that character gets magically turned into a literal jackass? Okay, so imagine a billion jokes like that, but without the clever parts.
Boy, do I feel like
Little chibi tiny Spider-Man shows up and just says the most unfunny shit. This show's sense of humor is like every generic joke people say when they want to exaggerate that something is failing at comedy, but completely unironic.
Awkward.
What are y'all looking at? There's something behind me, isn't there?
He's right behind me, isn't he? So, that happened.
At a certain point, I have to wonder who is this show for, because the writing is so aggressive about holding your hand and over-explaining to you everything that's happening. It makes me wonder if this was meant to be aimed at way younger kids. Spider-Man is either pausing the scene to deliver clumsy exposition directly to the viewer in case they missed a previous episode, or sometimes just explaining to you what you just saw 5 seconds ago as if you're a small child that didn't quite get it. This monkey sound effect is to this show as the whip crack is to Johnny Test. God damn.
Sorry.
What if I just put that into other Spider-Man shit?
Look over the side, hero. We have a surprise for you.
I'm not sure why so few of the writers could make the fourth wall humor actually convey useful information, or at the very least a little more amusing than like a light chuckle every 8th joke. I don't think Disney wanted this show to fail. They got a lot of talent in the writer's room. Paul Dini, co-creator of Batman the Animated Series, was a consultant writer on this. Man of Action, the creative team that made Ben 10 and Generator X, both solid shows, were there too. Brian Michael Bendis, love him or hate him, had some compelling stories about Spidey in the short term, so having him pen a few episodes wasn't necessarily doomed to fail. Plus, he wrote some of the best stuff in the 2003 show, so why not? And yet, we get an adaptation of the Ultimate Comics arc where Spider-Man and Wolverine switch brains, and he still made it a point to have Wolverine flirt with a 15-year-old Mary Jane.
Baby, I do like me a redhead.
Ew.
Why? Why keep that? Dumbass. So much of the writing in this show is really weak. Characters aren't developed at all, plots don't really go anywhere, and sometimes I swear it feels like characters are just saying dialogue for the sake of saying dialogue. Even if the thing they said doesn't really make any sense in context of what's happening or what was said just a second ago.
What's wrong? Aren't you going to run away?
Yeah, cool story, bro.
That wasn't a story, Amadeus. He asked you a question.
How can he be so happy? I'm never that happy. And I'm Spider-Man.
Whips or jokes? Where's your sense of humor, Peter?
He made a joke like 10 seconds ago. What the hell are you talking about, Norman?
And who's coming to hit me again?
Maybe on a script level, these lines might work, like if you're reading it, and the voice director is just asleep at the wheel and letting them read the lines in a way that doesn't really make sense. And Hey, new recording session. I don't have a throat infection anymore, so now my voice sounds okay. This show never grew on me per se, but I did start to enjoy watching it more in the later seasons because the most annoying parts became less prevalent, and more interesting side characters started to take center stage like Miles and Scarlet Spider. I don't think Ultimate Spider-Man ever really found its footing, but later on it got closer at least. While the heroes struggle as characters for various reasons, I am fascinated by what this show does with a lot of its villains. Some of the long-running story arcs of the show give special attention to Norman Osborn becoming an Ultimate and 616 Goblin hybrid, Doc Ock repeatedly leading the Sinister Six, and both of them using Venom as a sort of bioweapon. Much like the actual Ultimate Universe, the symbiote isn't an alien, but a synthetic creature created in a lab. This time by Otto instead of Peter and Eddie's dads. Venom isn't really a character in this universe so much as it is a plot device. There's no Eddie Brock, so Harry Osborn is the original villainous host for the symbiote, and I don't really like that direction.
Yes, Father. I want to prove myself by ridding the world of you.
Hearing Venom refer to Green Goblin as father bothers me. I don't like those characters being so tight at the hip. They're both unique antagonists on their own. Carnage appears in Season 2, but is basically just Venom again, but slightly upgraded, and the host is Peter. Harkening back to the PS2 game, shoehorning him in because a Venom Carnage boss fight was pretty cool.
I have a score to settle. Because we have a score to settle.
Kinda giving me mixed signals, Venom.
Then they bring Carnage back in Season 4, and he's totally different, and they act like it's his first time ever showing up again. There's no Cletus Cassidy because, it's hard to have a Disney animated show with a serial killer. At least his voice and design are better the second time around.
More chaos!
Eventually, Venom finds a new host in Season 3 with Flash Thompson, and I don't really love that either because it's too early. Flash needs a lot of growth and humbling before that works. This is a show for children, so they can't show him losing his legs in Unspecified The War, and I suspect they only included him in this show because A, it was current in the books at the time, and B, because the show was retitled The Web Warriors, and I think they wanted more spider-themed characters for the new toy line that assuredly resulted. I guess it's alright though, because no Spider-Man show is ever going to last long enough to fully adapt all the Flash Thompson stuff accurately, so it's either shove Agent Venom in too early, or he'll just never appear in any animated form at all. 20 years later, and Morbius still can't drink blood in these shows.
I can now drain the life energy from any being.
Norman Osborn is played more sympathetically this time around than the previous show, and I like that choice. Him being the Goblin is a change that's forced upon him by Doc Ock and not something he personally desired. But when he's cured of goblinism, he's actually a pretty alright guy and makes legitimate attempts to help Peter or become a superhero himself as Iron Patriot. And it's not all a big trick like in Dark Reign, he's actually doing the right thing. I also love how Electro is voiced by former Spidey Christopher Daniel Barnes. Once again, Electro in the comics has no personality, so they can just do whatever with him. In this universe, he's the only villain that actually enjoys Spidey's banter and finds his jokes pretty funny.
Always have your team in attendance.
Anyone have a pencil so I can scribble that one down?
Pencil.
How many Sinister Sixers does it take to change a light bulb? 6! 4 to hold down Electro and 1 to screw the light bulb into his mouth.
If you guys want to see that, it actually does work. Yeah, maybe later.
Sort of a cross-generational Spidey supporting Spidey thing. Also, for everyone that commented on the last episode and said that Electro is interesting because he was a normal working-class guy before his villain days, and he's like Peter if he was given great powers but wasn't responsible with it. You know, that applies to like 40 other characters in these comics too, right? Try harder. I want you to dig deep. Prove me wrong. Give me a real, legitimate reason to think Electro doesn't totally suck compared to every other villain in Spider-Man. Please, like, try hard. And speaking of those other villains, they kind of get the shaft in this show. Rhino is a mutated teenager at Peter's school trying to get back at Flash Thompson, and the episode is like a big anti-bullying message, but not nearly as impactful or dark as that other show. Eventually, he's recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D. to help Spider-Man, so he just stops being a villain. Vulture is a teenage goth kid with amnesia, and sort of like a fusion of Vulture and Carrion of all characters. The fact that he looks so much like this show's version of Otto Octavius and has the same voice actor, Tom Kenny, really made me think that they were going to reveal he was some kind of Doc Ock clone at some point, but that never happened, so he just looks and sounds like Doc Ock for no reason. Scorpion is a rival ninja from Kunlun that hates Iron Fist. Mysterio made a deal with Dormammu to create actual magic instead of illusions, but he ends up reforming to take care of his teenage daughter. All of these are very strange and feel like changes made just for the sake of being different, not for doing something more interesting with the characters. And I suspect some of these wildly alternate takes were mandated by Disney as a way to differentiate this series from Spectacular Spider-Man, since these came out so close together. I could never find a source to fact check this, but I read online once at some point in the last decade that this show's mission statement was not to retread the same ground as Spectacular, which is why there's no Eddie Brock, no real Peter Parker home life drama, and why so many of the villains are heavily remixed. Like, you got this show that was really good and comic accurate and was a hit with fans and critics alike, and will be remembered and loved forever for its really brilliant stamp on the character, and now you have to do the exact opposite of what that did. Which, if you think about it, sort of set them up for failure. I've never been able to find a source to corroborate this, but I think it would explain a lot of things about this show that never really gelled with Spidey fans. It's a multiversal constant that Flash Thompson will wear this costume at some point and be mistaken for the real Spider-Man by a villain. I hope to see this trend continue. It's really awesome. You may be wondering, in the wake of Spectacular Spider-Man making an interesting and well-developed character out of everyone Peter went to school with, how does Ultimate Spider-Man handle his massive cast of side characters? Unfortunately, extremely poorly. Everyone has one personality trait. Mary Jane wants to be a reporter because they keep making her Lois Lane. Ugh. We know nothing else about her, and she's basically irrelevant to this entire series. You could cut her out entirely and it wouldn't change a thing. They gave her the Carnage symbiote and made her Spider-Woman in the last season, so that character had something to do after not appearing for like 30 straight episodes. But even that episode is more about Scarlet Spider than her, so it wasn't necessary. She just doesn't do anything important in the entire cartoon. And her and Peter are also strictly friends and never actually attempt any sort of relationship. This Spider-Man is bitchless by choice. They didn't even want to try to write any kind of romance plot because it would be too clumsy and difficult. This Spider-Man is Arrow Ace, I guess. Peter and Flash's bully and victim to friends arc is clumsy, rushed, and doesn't hit as hard as the prior version, but an attempt was made at the very least. But much like MJ, it seems like the writers were constantly shoving Harry into new costumes and personas because they didn't know what else to do with him. So he's Black Suit Spider-Man, Venom, the Patrioteer instead of American Son, and Anti-Venom in this show. None of which were really all that interesting at all, which is why it kept changing so often. If they found something that worked, it would have stuck, but he's just... ugh. It seems like the writers of this show were afraid to tackle any kind of character drama that resembled real life, so it was easier to just slap stupid random superpowers on everyone and call it a day. It gets very repetitive that everyone Peter goes to high school with ends up becoming a superhero at some point. This show's Aunt May is decent at least, and this is the first animated version of her to learn Peter's secret, so it's kind of cool to see her being like an active parent to a superhero. The Peter Parker element of this show goes out the window for long stretches. You can go multiple full episodes back to back without him taking his mask off at all. He starts living at the S.H.I.E.L.D. facility full time and has no school, career, social life, or job. They don't explain why Aunt May doesn't even notice him leaving the house and living somewhere else. The duality of Spider-Man is a real non-entity for most of this show. Ultimate Spider-Man also has some very repetitive storytelling choices that unintentionally highlight the other biggest issue with this show. Several times. They do a Freaky Friday body swap story where Spider-Man and another major Marvel character switch minds. Or switch bodies. Whatever.
You put your mind in Spider-Man's body? That's brilliant. Oh, I'm going to write that down.
And in these moments, we hear really talented voice actors like Steve Blum, Fred Tatasciore, and Troy Baker all technically play Peter Parker in someone else's body.
We switched bodies? We switched entire bodies? What did you do? What freaky thing did you do to me that I'm in your hairy beast body? Oh, come on! My brain is in the Hulk's body? This cannot be happening again! Oh, my life is ruined!
Finally! If anyone could tell I'm not the real Loki, it'd be you, right? Cool! Loki doesn't fly? I thought Loki flew. I've gotta get to him somehow.
While Drake Bell plays... attempts to play these other characters.
You lost him? You don't lose him. He's a tracker, like me. He's on your trail, you dumb kid.
No, I'm telling you, I totally...
It's me, fool. I promised you Spider-Man's body. Here it is.
Don't worry, New York. There's more where that came from.
No!
Hulk don't like this. Hulk like purple.
Oh, man, they really hate the Hulk. And I thought they hated me.
Leave Hulk body alone!
Hearing this juxtaposition of the way more experienced veteran voice actors against Bell's feigned and half-hearted attempts to be these other guys paints a giant arrow pointing at the ultimate Spider-Man's most glaring design flaw.
Ah! I hope I don't miss. One, it would hurt. A lot. Go!
Drake Bell isn't a very good voice actor. Like, at all.
Is it weird that your voice is like claws on a chalkboard?
I mean, sure, I loved him in Drake and Josh growing up. I think he'd be hard-pressed to find an American in their early 20s that doesn't have a very fond memory of that show. But acting in a TV sitcom is extremely different from voice acting. Drake's delivery is pretty much always the same exaggerated high projection for a studio audience, not very believable, but you still buy it anyway because the fake sets and high-key lighting waiting for the laugh track sort of acting. And it just doesn't work here. I know it was a Nickelodeon show, but it's still basically Disney Channel acting. He can very rarely deliver any believable intensity.
How's your Aunt May, Peter? She seems like a nice woman.
Leave her alone! Gah! Stay away from her! You hear me, you monster? Gah!
Die, monster!
His line reads remind me of someone doing a comical, over-enthusiastic Sonic the Hedgehog impression where the punchline is the voice itself and not anything they said in the voice. Before this, his only voice acting credits were extras in Rugrats episodes or the Nutty Professor animated movie.
One of you girls care to dance?
What? Yeah, what?
On second thought, sit down, Chunky. You're not my type.
Yeah, let's give this guy the lead in our animated series with 104 episodes. He was teen guy number 3 and All Grown Up, so, you know. Big talent. So we have scripts with generally grating and unfunny jokes as read by a voice actor that can't really make any of it sound natural or believable, and it just kind of makes Spider-Man immensely annoying instead of charismatic or likable. Like, you just kind of want him to shut the hell up already. The villains should be feeling that about him, not me, the audience. I should be thinking he's funny.
What if I told you that this is myself? That every day I work so hard to be disciplined A student Ava and resist my true instincts? Well, I'm done.
Stunt casting major roles in the series with untrained voices that were in tween sitcoms at the time, you say? Why not throw 2 more on that pile? White Tiger's voice had 1 credit on IMDb before this. Nova's VA also has the same credit. Who the hell even heard of this I'm in the Band show? I never watched it. Was it any good? Are these 2 good in that show at least? Please, for the love of God, hire voice actors to voice act.
Woohoo!
There are already so many Josh Keatons, Ben Diskins, James Arnold Taylors, Robbie Damons, and Yuri Lowenthal's all lined up to be Spidey in this. The decision to go with Drake Bell is so baffling to me, because clearly he didn't win the role with his talent. Was there hopes that the tweens would recognize his name from that other show and get excited? Are you sure you're not confusing 2 completely different target audiences as one and the same? And to make matters worse, they have their very own Spider-Verse event where we get to hear several voice actors take on the same role. And you just wish the show had been about one of them this whole time. Except for not Mayday Spider-Girl, she stinks. Christopher Daniel Barnes is killing it though.
Back, lest I be forced to hurt thee! By Merlin, either thou art training to be my squire, or thou art the town fool!
In every universe, Peter Parker stands for heroism and responsibility. Except for one.
No.
Hell, as Blood Spider and even Spider-Ham, Ben Diskin is killing it.
May I? Scientific curiosity. If I could create my own sunlight, I could eliminate the vampire's reign once and for all with this.
What are you doing here?
Looking for a bathroom. What do you think I'm doing here? I'm here to help. Now hurry up.
Ben Diskin honestly would have been a great pick to voice Spider-Man in this whole show. He's in the same sort of vocal ballpark they were aiming for, but with way more talent and experience. And oh man, I'd kill for a Spider-Man 2099 cartoon or anything with this voice actor again. It's just so obvious and distracting who's played by an actual voice actor and who is just a sitcom star they pulled into the booth to lazily read lines while looking at their phones and waiting for an easy paycheck. Even in the episodes where they have him singing, he doesn't sound that good.
I will save you all by crawling up your wall. I'm Spider-Man. I Spider-Am. I am Spider-Man.
How's that even possible? Is he singing not as well on purpose so it doesn't seem like Peter has a really great singing voice? I'm giving him too much credit. I just don't think he cared that much. And it doesn't get better after 104 episodes. His quality of voice acting stays the same the entire way through.
Anything fun always ends with something exploding.
Too late, Spider-Man! Weed has been legalized!
What?
How come Spidey never mentioned to Spider-Ham that he was also a pig once in an earlier season? Oh, because these episodes were written by totally different people and there was no coordination in the writer's room at all. Why has Spider-Man made it a personal mission to fight every member of the cast of Wings? Regardless, this show's 2 Spider-Verse arcs are some of the highlights for heavily featuring Christopher Daniel Barnes in multiple roles and doing some really decent Miles and Peter stuff. I feel like some elements of these episodes ended up being inspiration for the Spider-Verse movie, like that alternate universe goblin design. The fact that Donald Glover got to play Miles Morales and Aaron Davis before anyone else is really cool to me, considering he was the inspiration for this storyline in the first place.
Your city belongs to the Grand Master.
No! This can't be how it ends!
If this were any other Spider-Man show, the whole thing would have ended right here. This is the only one that didn't get canceled on a cliffhanger. After 4 seasons, every character acts almost exactly the same as they did in Season 1 except Flash Thompson. Somehow he's the only character that had any development that mattered or affected anything. And even then, him discovering Peter's identity is brushed off so quickly.
Puny Parker? What? Yeah, but... No! No, that's impossible!
This wasn't the game changer I was expecting.
What, did you not feel like trying? I would have made that a bigger deal than 1 line of dialogue and then instant acceptance for the whole rest of the show. Ugh. Nearing the end of this series, I was starting to get exhausted with it, but kept hanging on because I at least like Agent Venom, Miles Morales, and Scarlet Spider. It's kind of an issue when those 3 are more exciting to watch than the actual Ultimate Spider-Man. Fuck changing Miles' name to Kid Arachnid, though. That was just disrespectful.
You can't both be Spider-Man.
Kid Arachnid? That's not bad, actually. Do I look like a Kid Arachnid to you? I guess so.
I don't care if it's confusing, just call him Spider-Man, fuck. I went into this show and this review really wanting to defend it and assure you that it's overhated, but watching the entire thing back to back really showed me that a lot of the complaints back in the day were totally valid. Despite the strong animation, aesthetics, character designs, and some mildly interesting alterations to the Spider-Man mythos, I can't say overall that I actually like this show. All these nice things are so heavily overshadowed by its flaws, and I can't say I'd ever find myself wanting to rewatch it after this review. I don't think I'd ever just, casually turn it on and relive it. The writing is surface level, the characters are flat, the humor is completely irritating, and every interesting idea is muddled by the above. I don't hate it, but it doesn't hold a ton of value in my eyes, and I can't really muster the strength to say it's underrated or any of that shit. I think maybe we overreacted and hated it too much, but every complaint about it was pretty much on the money too. That's why I said this defense was really lukewarm, where it's like, yeah, you guys are right, but I don't know. I don't hate it that much. There's stuff that's cool. I like Scott Porter. I can't think of much that this show did that had a lasting influence on the character or the fans in the same way its predecessors did. Other Spidey cartoons were used as the blueprint for multiple whole movies, introduced ideas that were cool enough to pull into the books, or are just so fascinating that they're being talked about decades after they ended. Ultimate Spider-Man was perhaps a trial run for the MCU's Spider-Man by having him so heavily connected with other Marvel characters and even meeting MCU-specific characters, like these three assholes from the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But even that end result was so extremely different from this, and I feel like the MCU Spidey ended up taking more from Spectacular. And frankly, I just never see or hear anyone talk about this show anymore. It's the longest running Marvel cartoon ever by a wide margin, and yet it just seems like it came and went and that was it. Maybe a few ideas from it weirdly ended up in the Insomniac games, but I feel like no one even really noticed that. After 4 seasons of 104 episodes, the show was canceled and very swiftly rebooted. I assume in no small part due to Drake Bell getting a DUI, the first in a long stream of very questionable actions from the singer, and Disney probably felt it better for their brand to start over once again without his name attached. Which is fine, because after 4 seasons, it had run its course. If you don't get anywhere after 104 episodes, you're really not going to get anywhere after that. Ultimate Spider-Man struggled in a lot of ways, but it had untapped potential and opportunities to improve slightly that it never fully grasped. It'll never have the same lasting impact and high regard of these other shows because it went for quantity over quality and always held itself back from more interesting things with its characters. It just goes to show that a series that took the easy route at every turn really didn't end up challenging its audience in any way that made them care. It lacked a lot to be desired, but you know, it could always be worse.
You have a cut on your lip.
My crack pipe broke. You have a scratch on your neck.
Yes, I met a girl on Craigslist. And you have a bruise on your neck.
I met a guy on Craigslist.